We've done some talking in the sections of this course that we're offering about how women in the period just before World War I began to see themselves as political activists. And I'd like to start by asking you about their particular activism in the women's peace movement, which I gather they were rather influential in creating. Can you start there and tell us something about that peace movement?
Well, it was a peace movement that really could not believe Europe was about to plunge into war again. There had been peace for the 19th century after the War of 1812. There'd been moments of empire building and wars of empire, but no war, international war. And the women who founded the peace movement, Crystal Eastman, Jane Addams, Lillian Wald, were great reformers who understood that for there to be peace, you needed economic justice. For there to be peace, you needed democracy. You needed people who cared about their citizens and who cared about their neighbors and who cared about the future.
But these women, the women involved in the peace movement, tell us something about how they got together and why they were particularly concerned with a war in Europe.
Well, they really wanted, first of all, they didn't want the world to blow up. They didn't want all those people to die unnecessarily. And they certainly did not want the US in this international war, this European war. So they founded something called the American Union Against Militarism.
And when did this happen?
About the war started in Europe in 1914, and by 1915 they were organized into the Women's Peace Party and the American Union Against Militarism. And both organizations tried to meet with leaders to see if they couldn't have an international meeting at The Hague to bring about peace. So they were going to have boats of women to go to Europe and see if they couldn't meet with leaders to push for peace, a ceasefire. Then they wanted to have some assurance the US wouldn't enter this war. And then when the US did enter the war, they wanted to make sure that civil liberties and the right to dissent, the right to speak against the war was preserved because, of course, in 1917 we have the Espionage Act, which we are familiar with today, and they opposed that. So out of the American Union Against Militarism came the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And out of the Women's Peace Party came the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And this was a global movement for peace, which involved women in all the warring countries, England, France, Germany, as well as the women in the United States.
Let's back up a little bit and talk about who these women are and whether and how these, I assume, American women became part of a larger European group, or did they?
They did. And we have to back up a little bit further to talk about the suffrage movement, because many of them met at international meetings for suffrage.
Tell us who
the suffragists were. Jane Addams, Lillian Wald, and they're known in the United States because they found the great settlement houses. Jane Addams, Hull House in Chicago, Lillian Wald, the Henry Street settlement here in New York. And they were internationally known women who went to Europe. I mean, Toynbee Hall in London is the model for Hull House in Chicago and Henry Street in New York. And they see how Toynbee Hall is organized, and they come back from meetings in London saying, we can do that too. They also are fighting for suffrage. And it's really kind of ironic. Crystal Eastman, who graduates from NYU Law School, second in her class in 1909.
She's the first female graduate.
She is the first female graduate. And she becomes internationally a great international traveler. She and her brother Max Eastman run a magazine, a radical magazine called The Liberator. And they do have all these international connections. And there's so much ferment going on. There's the women's suffrage movement, and then there's the socialist movement, and then there is this democratic movement for peace and freedom. And
so Wald and
Jane
Addams and Crystal Eastman together,
right,
talking to each other, presumably create the Women's Peace Party,
yes,
along with other
people.
Women.
Yes.
And this Women's Peace Party grows into a larger organization,
yes,
which becomes an international organization. Right. Is that
the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom? And they are at The Hague. There's the women first meeting at The Hague in 1915, where they're trying to, broker peace. So there's this international meeting at The Hague where they all meet.
This is the famous peace ship.
The famous peace ship.
Assume
yes.
that Addams and Wald and many other women go to Europe to try to
yes,
broker
a peace. The conclusion of war. I mean, that's what they're hoping to do. Right. And the Treaty of Versailles is actually based on what they come up with
but
at The Hague.
But when war breaks out and they
fail.
They have failed.
Right.
Exactly. What then is their position? Do they support the war? Do they?
Well, it's really interesting because they protest in that they support conscientious objectors and they support the right to dissent. And that's the origins of the ACLU. But the AUAM sort of becomes something else. It becomes two things. It becomes the ACLU and the League to Enforce Peace, which is an organization that becomes very important to get the US to join the League of Nations and to join the World Court at the end of the war. So it's a long-range vision that they have, and they continue to battle for it. They also, it's fascinating.
So they actually go through the 2 years
of the war
in which the U.S. is in the war.
Yes.
Although,
and lots of people are arrested and deported, like Emma Goldman.
Right. So so those who continue to oppose the war,
right,
the radicals who continue to oppose the war, if it's possible to arrest them and jail them or to deport them shortly after the war, they're gone.
Yes.
Jane Addams, who also continues to be opposed to the war, turns from an American heroine into
into an enemy of the people. The year of her death, 1935, the FBI says she's the most dangerous woman in America.
Jane Addams?
Jane Addams in 1935. John Edgar Hoover says she's the most dangerous woman in America.